smaller theatres around central Germany and find Wagner perform to the same or even better standard. Well, that wonderful singer Lisa Davidson made her Bayreuth debut singing Elisabeth in Tannhäuser in 2019. Here she is singing from the Wesendonck Lieder, singing of dreams, wondrous dreams, embracing all my senses, dreams that with every hour bloom more lovely.
Director of Public Health with our care systems, but we also want prescribing to be more precise and very only be prescribing where we absolutely need to use antibiotics, and clearly need to work with professionals in the NHS.
What about the things we don't know, the unknown unknowns? Do we just have to accept that we can't plan for everything?
Well, we clearly can't plan precisely for an unknown, because by its name we won't know what it is until it arrives, but what we can do is go searching for it. So one of the things we are doing is, as we've seen in the pandemic, is use data in a very different way. So we are setting ourselves up to do much more systematic surveillance, both of the infections that we know, but also using things like metagenomics, where you are not following a single pathogen through the use of genomics, but you're looking at the risks associated with the presentation. So, for example, respiratory infections.
A final thought, is your organisation up to the job? The Public Accounts Committee in Parliament concluded that the financial controls over your agency were so weak it couldn't be established whether your accounts were true or fair, and they criticised you directly, didn't they, suggesting that you had no previous technical experience in elements of running a complex organisation?
Well, I would strongly deny the second point. I mean, I've been a senior manager right across the south of England, health protection systems in private business and in government departments, so that is factually incorrect. But I think what you've seen in that report is quite a difficult hand given to us, and that is, if you like, last year's picture, the hand that we were given. If you look at the organisation now, we have managed the big size in staffing, and successfully, I might add, and safely in staffing, and a 12 billion reduction in spend in a single year, which I think is the largest that any government department has ever achieved in that time frame. All of our governance systems are in place now.
Thank you. Dame Jenny Harris there, Chief Executive of the UK Health Security Agency. 3 minutes to 8, time for the weather forecast. Here's Simon.
Yeah, hello Nick, thank you, good morning. We've got some showers in the forecast today, but also some sunny spells developing as well. But then as we go into the rest of the week, we've got areas of low pressure moving its way, and it'll make it turning quite wet and windy, especially later on Wednesday from the west. But today for southwest England, the Midlands, eastern and southeastern England, we've got a few showers this morning around East Anglia, a bit of cover as well, but otherwise some sunny spells to start the day. The cloud will build up fairly quickly when the sun shines, and we'll see some well scattered showers developing this afternoon, popping up just about anywhere, and maximum temperatures getting up to 17 to 20 degrees. Should also note that it'll be becoming increasingly dry and sunny in southwest England late this afternoon. For Wales and northwest England, some areas of this morning, and again some showers affecting northwestern parts of England. We'll keep some showers going at times today, but turning drier and sunnier through the afternoon, highs of 16 to 20 Celsius. And then for northeast England and eastern Scotland, a few sunny spells. It's a dry start for most actually, but showers will develop and they'll turn heavy and thundery in places, with highs of 15 to 18 degrees. And for the rest of Scotland and Northern Ireland, quite cloudy, some rain actually in northwestern Scotland this morning. That's sinking its way southward. There'll be some sunny spells.
And new Friday Night Satire on BBC Radio 4.
Hello, I'm Dom Jolly, and I'm going to be bringing you a mashup of interviews, features, prank calls in Dom Jolly Breaks the News. Oh, sorry, was that my fault?
6 one-off topical comedy specials. I'm Catherine Bellhart, and in TLDR, I'll be digging deep into one of the week's big stories. Whew. 6 different presenters. including Rhys James, Rialina, Andrew Hunter-Murray, and starting with me, Rachel Paris, and my interview show, The Newsmakers, news satire on and BBC Sounds on Friday nights at 6:30.
Coming up, if you don't want a housing development built in your backyard, whose backyard would you like it to be built in? We're discussing that dilemma facing Michael Gove, the Housing Secretary, with him. And we'll be hearing from Kevin McLeod on what those new houses might look like.
You're listening to Today on BBC Radio 4 with Nick Robinson and Chris Mace. It's 8 o'clock on Tuesday the 25th of July. The headlines this morning: Israeli security forces have clashed with protesters angry about the passing of laws which will curb the powers of the judiciary. More flights carrying British tourists fleeing the wildfires in Rhodes will arrive back in the UK today. A record number of people have been identified as possible victims of modern slavery. And there's a warning that the NHS in England faces severe strain over the next decade because of people with long-term serious illnesses. The BBC News is read by Tom Sanders.
Huge protests have taken place across Israel throughout the night after MPs approved new judicial laws which have sparked deep divisions within the country. Thousands of people took to the streets in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, blocking highways and clashing with security forces, who tried to disperse them with water cannon. The law is the first in a series of proposals which limit the Supreme Court's right to overrule government decisions. Critics say they are a threat to democracy, but the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insists they are necessary. Our correspondent Paul Adams sent this report from Jerusalem.
Benjamin Netanyahu has won an important victory. Defying months of passionate street protests, he's managed to pass one key part of his judicial reform program, limiting the powers of the Supreme Court. Last night, in a primetime address, he called for national unity, but indicated he plans to press ahead with reforms which his opponents argue undermine the rule of law and Israeli democracy.
We agreed to significant changes on the original policies, and I say with sadness, none of the compromise proposal was accepted. None. Even today, during voting, up until the last moment, we tried to get agreements, but the other side kept refusing.
The bill passed yesterday is likely to be challenged in the very court whose powers the government seeks to limit. With the markets rattled, labour unions discussing a possible strike, and military reservists vowing not to report for duty, the battle over the government's reforms seems destined to go on.
The United States has renewed its concerns about the plans by one of its closest allies. In a statement, it said it was unfortunate that the law had been passed through the Israeli parliament with the slimmest possible majority. The White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, insisted the US would continue to support efforts for all sides to find common ground.
President Biden has been a friend of Israel for decades. It is a personal relationship, it is a lifelong friend of Israel, and we are going to continue to engage our Israeli counterparts to try and strengthen that special bond, and that certainly will be the plan going forward.
More British tourists will be brought back to the UK today from the Greek island of Rhodes, which has been ravaged by wildfires. The government said yesterday as many as 10,000 British people were on the island. From Rhodes, here's Jenny Hill.
Flooded firefighting aircraft took to the skies to drop water onto the blazing ground. The fires are still burning out of control in central and southeastern Rhodes, fanned by strong winds. Firefighters on the islands of Evia and Corfu are also still battling wildfires. And the Greek Prime Minister is expected to discuss the issue with ministers at a meeting later this morning. Kyriakos Mitsotakis, who has said his country is at war with the wildfires, will be painfully conscious of their potential impact on the tourism industry. It's feared that some hotels on Rhodes may stay closed for weeks. Mr. Mitsotakis, who has also acknowledged the coming days will be difficult, issued a stark warning. The climate crisis, he said, was already here. It would manifest itself everywhere in the Mediterranean, he added, with greater disasters.
A study by an international group of leading climate scientists has found the recent powerful heat waves in Europe and the US would have been virtually impossible without global warming caused by humans. They warn that future heat waves will be even more extreme if greenhouse gas emissions are not cut rapidly. Climate reporter Georgie Renard.
The scientists behind the study, the World Weather Attribution Group, say they are not surprised by the results, concluding that the impact of climate change has caused the extreme peaks in heat seen around the world this month. In southern Europe and the US, the scientists say the role of climate change was so large that the recent heat waves would have been virtually impossible in pre-industrial times. Humans have been pumping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere for decades by burning fossil fuels, but this study warns that if warming continues at the current pace, intense heat waves will occur every 2 to 5 years.
Figures obtained by Motorway's File on 4 programme show 17,000 people reported to the Home Office last year as potential victims of modern slavery, most since records began in 2009. Many are people who have threatened of being deported. Terry would get £22 an hour as a carer and forced to work long hours.
I developed a urinary infection. It actually collapsed. I was supposed to go to work. That's how I went to the hospital. I was so scared. And I thought they had all the power and they were holding all the cards. And I just had to obey the rules. It was either that or I go back home. I missed so much to come here.
The Game Masters and Labour Abuse Authority said the company was using work visas to control people. Ian Waterfield from the agency said the care industry was its biggest priority.
Significant fees that have been charged, unethical recruitment agencies abroad, £20,000 for a work finding fee and visa. So people are debt bonded before they actually arrive in the UK, and then that forces them really to accept any kind of work that recruiter gives them.
Rishi Sunak has insisted his approach to building more houses is targeted, not protectionist. Writing in the Times, the Prime Minister said his plans were not about uncontrolled development of the countryside, but that homes must be built in the right places and communities must have a say. But a warning that the number of people with serious illnesses in England will rise dramatically by 2040, with major implications for the NHS. The independent charity The Health Foundation says, in contrast, the working age population, which generates much of the revenue to fund public services, will increase at a much slower rate. Here's our health correspondent, Nick Triggle.
Conditions such as dementia, diabetes and cancer are already placing a major burden on the NHS. Currently, 6.6 million people are living with a major illness. But those numbers are expected to rise sharply to 9.1 million by 2040, nearly 1/5 of the population, according to projections from the Health Foundation. That would equate to a rise of 37%, while the healthy working age population is predicted to only go up by 4%. Most of the increase has been driven by the ageing population, but there is expected to be growing numbers of working age people in ill health too.
Radiographers who carry out scans on NHS patients went on a 48-hour strike in parts of England and dispute about pay. The government insists its 5% pay proposal is reasonable, but the Society of Radiographers says talks should reopen because other public sector workers have been offered more. Saffron Cordery is the Deputy Chief Executive of NHS Providers, which represents health trusts. She told us the strike would cause significant disruption and there were wider fears that walkouts by health workers wouldn't end anytime soon.
I think there's a serious concern that we go on like this month after month after month, a fear that this could run up to the next general election. I think the thing that trust leaders want to know is that by September or October this could be over, because we come into the winter period then, and that's going to get really, really difficult. So what we need to see is the government come to the table and negotiate.
A cryptocurrency scheme has been launched by the AI entrepreneur behind the chatbot ChatGPT. People receive digital coins in return for a scan of their eyeballs.